Yeah, I mean, we can learn something. And I think Trump has indicated that he did learn something from his first administration. First of all, when you're part of a revolutionary movement like MAGA is, um, you don't have backing in the establishment. It's not like there are MAGA professors that have insinuated their way into mainstream academia. You don't have a MAGA party in Congress. You don't. I mean, there's just a whole bunch of things. You're sort of on your own, and even though he has an R next to his name, when a Republican, uh, it's difficult when much of the Republican Party was against him back in his first term, and there's even some holdouts to this day that aren't supporting him. But I do think that he has surrounded himself with enough outliers that they don't have the hidden umbilical cord to the establishment, and so I think that there will be a concerted effort to bring about the kind of change that Trump has threatened to do, and the establishment doesn't want him to do. But I do think that we'll have to be on guard. When I say will, Trump will have to be on guard for the hidden agents, the stay behind agents. There was an interesting article written by the former deputy national security advisor to Trump, um, who, when he found out that Trump was going to keep the National Security Council about the same size, um, and was going to allow up to in some cases 2/3, but at least a third of the current staffing to stay in. He said, no, these people have been politicized. They work for Team Biden, and they're not going to be able to take off the hat. So they will stay behind to sabotage Trump. And I think that's one of the things that Trump has to watch out for, is the sabotage of his efforts that will come from within, not in a direct fashion where you can say, "Aha, that's the establishment." It'll come from inside the team that he's building, that he feels is on his side. I think he has to guard for the ability of the establishment to infiltrate and do their best to control what Trump's trying to do and undermine it where they don't want it to succeed.
Well, I hope you're right, Scott. I've always been suspicious of not just Donald Trump. I know you've been very critical of Donald Trump as well, but even the movement behind it. While I am all for the anti-interventionism, I'm truly hoping that, and what I see as the conditions on the ground as being a huge impetus for possibly leading to, I think, a big conflict within the political establishment, because there will be many forces trying to do more of the same, and there will be pressure on a Trump administration to, at the very least, save face from what is, if Donald Trump goes through 4 years, if he gets there, of a genocide in Gaza and Ukraine. We can get to that later, but Ukraine, if that doesn't resolve itself in some way beneficial to the United States, there will be a lot of trouble politically here. So one thing though, Scott, I wanted to talk to you about was these drills that you mentioned that Iran has been taking part in. So Israeli media has been framing these drills as almost an emergency act to prepare for war with Israel. Now, these drills occur every single year, but Israeli media is saying that they've doubled in size, and they're focusing a lot on what they're saying are nuclear sites, because Israel has a dream of bombing their nuclear sites. But the spokesperson for the IRGC, Ali Mohammed Naini, in talking about the Great Prophet, I guess that's what it's translated to with these drills, he talked about how, and he directly cited enemies, and he said, Iran has been fully prepared since long ago for big and complicated battles on any scale. The enemy knows the skies of the occupied territories are clear and defenseless for us. We can act against Israel with greater magnitude, speed, accuracy, and the production of our weapons and missiles continues to advance daily. They've also unleashed some incredible technology during these drills, Scott. These like floating missiles, these missile cities, these underground missile technological hubs where they can essentially not only protect Iran, but launch basically at will. And I'm just curious, Scott, your thoughts about this. Iran is saying they're ready for war. Many people have said, well, Iran is weak. They're not taking a strong enough stance. They didn't do Operation True Promise 3. But these drills have demonstrated pretty impressive military capabilities. What are your thoughts about this?
Well, first of all, the spokesperson for the RGC is 100% correct. When the United States invaded Iraq and overthrew Saddam Hussein, the Iranians believed that they were going to be next in line, that the United States was going to eventually target them for a massive military assault designed to physically occupy Iran and eliminate the government. And so what the Iranians did is they broke Iran down into military districts. And the concept of each military district is that it could stand by itself. It didn't have to communicate with the center, didn't have to coordinate with anybody else. And it wasn't just about defending their territory, but each one of these districts retained offensive strike capability that would allow them to attack, the enemies of Iran. Again, even if they have no communication with Tehran, they can do this on their own. And they created these autonomous defense districts. They still exist. They're still there. And what all the Iranians are doing is giving them more advanced tools to defend Iran from any potential attacker. But the idea that Iran is only now waking up to the threat posed by Israel and the United States is wrong. Iran's been preparing for this since 2003 at the very least, when the United States invaded Iraq. And I think that we again, war is an extension of politics by other means, though. And this great prophet exercise is just a demonstration of military capability, and it's done for propaganda purposes. I mean, if Iran was really intent on doing harm, many of these military capabilities have already been tested, proven. There's been minor exercises to validate procedures, but there's no reason to do a great giant exercise with lots of media attention that's showing the new weapons and showing it. You're doing that not just for domestic consumption, but you're doing that for the world to see. It's part of the deterrence posture of the Iranians. And the purpose of deterrence is to avoid an attack. I don't think the Iranians are looking for a war with Israel. I think Iran would prefer that the situation in Gaza get resolved without Israel and Iran having to go to war. Iran supported Hezbollah and indicates that it will continue to support Hezbollah in Hezbollah's resistance actions. But Iran is definitely right now not looking for a fight. That's the words that were spoken apparently by the Iranian foreign minister to the Turkish foreign minister. The Turkish foreign minister relayed the substance of this conversation. But we also appear to see, indications from the presidency that Iran is ready to enter into serious negotiations with the United States about Iran and its nuclear program, etc. These are all indicators that Iran is looking for an off-ramp, not Iran is itching for a fight.
Yeah, even the RGC spokesperson said they're not wanting to start a war with Israel, that they're ready for war with Israel. Scott, could you go over some of these weapons that have been demonstrated by Iran? The missile and drone cities include a missile storage facility in a southern Iran-based complex designed for naval vessels. And of course, there's also a demonstration of naval power by Iran in these drills. Could you talk about what these weapons are and what they mean? Because we know that Israel and the United States, even a large chunk of it, in the establishment, the foreign policy establishment, have been itching for a war with Iran. how do these capabilities that Iran are demonstrating actually exercise or provide a deterrence factor, given that Israel has struck Iran and they claim that they destroyed all of its air defenses? What do you make of these capabilities Iran is showing?
Well, first of all, I can't claim to have familiarity with the missile city in the south and its Navy, so I won't talk on that because I'd just be making stuff up, and I don't do that. So I have to acknowledge that I haven't read into that. I've been focusing on a lot of the air defense. Iran has been showing, very modern air defense capabilities, and they've been trying to push back against the notion that Israel somehow penetrated Iran's air defense back in, was it October, and destroyed some capabilities, and that Iran is shivering in fear over Israel's ability to penetrate its air defense. And so Iran's made 2 points. One, that you can't penetrate our air defense, or you didn't. Iran claims they didn't, and that we have even better air defense now than before. And then two, that it's Iran that can continue to penetrate the Iron Dome at will. Iran has, advanced ballistic missile capability, hypersonic missile capability, etc. On the conventional side, I was really impressed with one demonstration, or at least discussion of a demonstration. That was the ability to do a mass drone launch that incorporates AI in the targeting, meaning that the drones will launch and then communicate amongst themselves, pick targets, discriminate targets, and then attack the targets, independent of GPS guidance and things of that nature. This is something that Russia was working on with the Lancet missile. An advanced version of the Lancet was supposed to be able to do that. But as far as I know, Russia hasn't actually fielded that capability, definitely not using it on the battlefield yet. Iran, however, has demonstrated that it's ready now. It has it now. That would imply that they're even more advanced than Russia on this capability, that they are definitely looking at the modern battlefield. I know when we did the Iran war plans back in the 1980s, the Iranian military wasn't even considered to be near peer. Technologically, our military was far more advanced, and we just felt that we would cut through them like a hot knife through butter. That's no longer the case. The Iranian military today is extremely capable, professional, with the best equipment out there. And anybody who thinks that Iran's going to go down easy is wrong. And I think that's the purpose of this exercise. This exercise serves as a demonstration of deterrence.
Yeah, and perhaps to close on the Middle East, Scott, you mentioned Hezbollah before and its ability to withstand these hits, and essentially during that attempted ground invasion, repel Israel's attempts to invade. And we've been hearing, of course, Hezbollah is defeated, Hamas is defeated, Iran is defeated from the Israeli side and the U.S. side a lot. But I wanted to show you something that I found from the Washington Institute, which is an incredibly neocon think tank. I mean, we're talking about people like Joe Lieberman, the Hoover Institute. We can go on and on and on about who supports the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. They're all, many of them, architects of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. But this article here is very interesting. And then it talks about, don't assume Iran's supply lines to Hezbollah are cut. And it proposes these 4 possibilities that may continue to provide an outlet to Hezbollah. Continued overload truck transport through Iraq, across central Syria into Lebanon. So Syria, even though Assad is gone, perhaps still providing that. Other overland routes, Iraq, Jordan, southern Syria, or Iraq, Turkey, in northern Syria. Maritime transport to Syria's Mediterranean coast, truck transport to Lebanon, and then air transport into Syria, truck transport into Lebanon. What's so interesting about this, Scott, is that, when one thing that some have pointed out is that Syria is about to enter into a big period of chaos. It's going to be incredibly difficult to govern Syria with all these various factions doing what they do, and they're doing it now. In terms of these gross, just absolutely obscene violations of human rights and just disgusting treatment of ethnic minorities in Syria and religious minorities like the Alawites. But even the Washington Institute is conceding, or maybe this is propaganda, that Hezbollah might not essentially be cut off just yet. What do you make of this? And do you see that the fighting between Hezbollah and Israel continuing after the ceasefire expires?
Well, first of all, I do think that there's going to be fighting after the ceasefire expires. Hezbollah has made it part of their core reason to exist. The eviction of Israeli occupiers from the soil of Lebanon, that's what gives them legitimacy, inside Lebanon. That's why the Lebanese army hasn't, demanded their, demobilization. It's because they have a legitimate resistance mission against Israeli occupiers. And a lot of people may not know, but the Shebaa Farms region is, Hezbollah and Lebanon consider that to be Lebanese territory. The Israelis say, no, it's Syrian territory. Therefore, we're not occupying Lebanon, and therefore Hezbollah is illegitimate. But from the Hezbollah perspective, and more importantly, from the Lebanese government perspective, the Shebaa Farms are definitely Lebanese soil. Therefore, that gives legitimacy to everything that Hezbollah does. But now we have even more territory that's been occupied by the Israelis. So this is just literally the easiest case in the world to make for, continued resistance against Israel. And I'll leave it. I actually just lost track of where I was. I got bogged down. If you want to restate the question, I can reapproach it.
No worries. No, I was, the Washington Institute is promoting these ideas.
Now I'm back.
The resupply routes of Hezbollah.
Yeah, I had done the whole answer on the analyzing the 4 routes, and then I got caught into talking about Hezbollah resisting, and I wasn't able to get back. But now I'm back. It's a danger of getting old. The interesting thing about these 4 routes, first of all, Israel has been in the business of interdicting Iranian shipments to Hezbollah for some time now, and they weren't able to fully achieve that. But they have a very good idea about how the material comes in and in what form it comes in. Remember, it's not just the monitoring that's taking place, but apparently we now know that Israel had people on the inside of Hezbollah and giving away some very, very sophisticated information. One of the things they gave away was a underground missile production facility inside Syria that was being done as part of this program, meaning that the weapons would be built in Syria and then shipped to Lebanon. And the Israeli air commandos launched put 120 guys on the ground and went in there and blew the place up. So they have good intelligence that way. The interesting thing about the factories is that I think that allows Hezbollah to build the basic building blocks of these weapon systems locally. Therefore, all they would need to get is the various components, the chemicals, etc. But the factory's there. What they can't produce are the precision guided, the guidance systems, the sensitive electronics, etc. The server motors on the ailerons. And so what the Iranians would do is provide kits. And the important thing about the kits here, if you want to evaluate these 4 lines, we can't be thinking about the Iranians putting completed missiles on the back of a truck or, dismantled missiles on the back of the truck. That's how they did it early on to get some of the weapons in. But now they have the factories that are producing the big components. So what Iran is bringing in are the very sophisticated components that it's difficult to have a factory of that in Lebanon, or Hezbollah for to put a factory together for that. So Iran is supplying those kits. And where the Washington Institute might have a point is you can smuggle kits. I mean, I can put kits in a box, throw them on the back of a mule, and smuggle it the same way that they've been smuggling heroin for decades now. We know that the borders in these areas are porous, that smugglers, make a living on a daily basis transporting things back and forth. And so it is conceivable that Hezbollah has negotiated several rat lines, smuggler lines, to get not complete weapons, but the sophisticated components in there. And if Hezbollah was able to retain some sort of manufacturing capability, that Hezbollah would be able to rearm or re-equip itself with some Iranian input. So, but the large scale resupply, large shipments of ammunition and all that, that's much more difficult to do. And one of those is unrealistic. I don't know what the date of that article was, but Israel's made it clear that any Iranian aircraft that tries to land on Syrian soil will be shot down. So the idea of the Iranians running covert midnight flights, landing with lights out condition in the desert, no.
Yeah, and what's interesting about this too, from a political perspective, and just looking at that, the landscape right now, especially after the fall of Syria, is that with Turkey and Israel, which these are governments that don't have necessarily a lot of popularity, let's say, in in the particular areas that the Washington Institute was talking about, right? Where there's a huge possibility that Turkey's expansion into Syria will be very unpopular with a lot of people in Syria. There's already it's almost a guarantee that what Israel is doing in Syria, given that Israel has been doing it for a long time in Syria, occupying large parts of its land, is unpopular. So that leads to these, even though when I was looking at that list, I was like, wait, a lot of these governments, a lot of these states are hostile to the idea of the resistance. But it seems to me that there might be, as you said, with smuggling and these kind of rat lines, and fueled by both chaos and political feelings and ill feelings toward those forces that Hezbollah and similar resistance groups are waging resistance against. That leads to opportunities for the possibility for a resumption or a reloading toward a resumption of this, what seems to be and what's going to be a long war, a long resistance war with Israel, and of course the United States backing it.
I mean, if the resistance is able to, if the Axis resistance is able to reconstitute, some meaningful supply line, I think Hezbollah has the not only the means but the legitimate justification for continuing to resist Israel. And you're right about the long war. I just want to make a comment about the long war. As time has passed since the collapse of Bashar al-Assad's regime, both Russian and Iranian sources have, gone and talked to the people on the ground to say, hey, what happened? How did this happen? And two components jump out, and they're related. One is governments that have been in place for a long time, and the other one is economic sanctions, or something that strangles, the economy. Governments have been for a long time, even under the best of conditions. I mean, just think about it. Democracies, if you have a great guy, let's say there were no term limits, there's not too many presidents that I think would last more than 3 terms. Even if they're widely popular, by the end of the 3rd term, people are like, we need a change. We need something to go, to change here. So when you have these autocracies that govern forever. There's already within the system, I think, a natural inclination towards change. So you already have people under the best of conditions are saying, maybe it's time for them to go. Maybe we need to do something to get rid of them. Then you pile onto that economic sanctions or suppressed economic activity, and now you have people rising up saying, not it would be nice to have change, saying we must have change. And they eat this, the combination of that, I think, eats the heart of the country involved, the government involved, so that in the end it's just this framework, shallow framework with veneer on it. It's not substantive. And that's what happened in Syria. It's just that the Syrian government lost the faith of these, the people lost faith with their government. The government lost the ability to rule because of the combination of a long time not changing patterns, and then sanctions, and of course the fighting that wore things down. You just had this hollow shell. Why I bring that up is there's not a government in the region that doesn't fit that definition. Erdogan's been in since early 2000s. Economic problems. You could bring Erdogan down just by squeezing the economy. That's right. One theory that exists in the CIA. Iran, the Iranians themselves. I mean, I remember Raisi said back in September 23 that because of the unrest that took place after the death of that Kurdish girl over a violation of hijab, it was actually a insurrection that was mounted by foreign powers to try and bring down the government. The government survived, but Iran is one of those places where you have a government that's been in power for a long time. There's an inherent desire for change. And if the government doesn't deliver on the promise of better economic conditions, it becomes a framework, a veneer, a collapse. You know who else fits this description? Israel. So everybody's talking about how immortal Israel is, greater Israel is going to live forever. Netanyahu, in one form or another, has been in power since the mid-1990s. He has built a system that is not flexible, doesn't bring about change, and there's a growing group of Israelis who want this change. And then you look at the economic state of affairs for Israel, and there's we can sit here and talk about the potential of conflict, long wars, but understand this: almost every nation in the region is susceptible to the same collapse syndrome that happened in Syria. So I don't think continuing these policies that bring about chaos and anarchy is conducive to longevity of any of the governments of the Middle East.
Which then makes it very interesting, Scott, because we've been making the point here on this show that Iran has a lot of justifications for not escalating with Israel as much as possible because Iran is under these very harsh sanctions, yet is, we have to say, despite its economic problems, one of the most stable economies in the region, despite its want and its relative impoverishment because it's been cut off from much of the world economy. We don't necessarily hear, what's that economic crash doing in Iran every so many years. It's because there's obviously been efforts internally in Iran to stabilize things, to survive the sanctions. It's built up. You've talked about Iran's military capabilities as also an economic policy. And then on the, and with that point, Iran saw what happened in Syria. I mean, Syria, the sanctions just absolutely decimated the economy. Everybody was impoverished. Everyone was in extreme poverty, and it was being bombed all of the time. And it had basically the sanctions came after. I've been making this point, Scott. The sanctions came after just one of the most devastating, dirty wars that we had seen, short of a Libya-style or an Iraq-style military incursion. They were unable to repair that society. Bashar al-Assad could do nothing to do. I mean, maybe some people argue, oh, we'll get closer to Russia and China. But sanctions are a very difficult thing, and it can be the breadth of these sanctions extended into the financial system. It was brutal. So I think Iran is looking at this and saying, well, this is why we got to pace ourselves, because if we end up in a situation where we're at full-out war, then we are under threat. But guess what? The entire region's resistance can't afford us to be in a state of imminent collapse. So I see, and then when you made the point about Israel, I think that's a very good point, because Israel's a colony. Israel, similar to South Africa, it seems like its date has come. Like it's like overdue for massive change and transformation, and it is right now committing a genocide, which nobody in the world likes and wants to see, if you have any humanity at all. And you said, oh well, these like chaos, these wars going on forever, just all these governments won't benefit from it. Well, Israel is literally saying to the world, oh no, we're going to just forever benefit from being at war, from committing genocide, up until no end. There's no date. There's no, well, we're going to achieve this and that will end it. No. In my opinion, every time Israel talks about Hamas, despite the resistances, what I think is a heroic resistance by Hamas, a lot of times I'm just thinking, well, I think Israel is just talking about civilians. They're just talking about killing civilians, and they're just Hamas. Like, well, we've killed all these civilians. Why is Hamas still here? Well, because one, you're not really fighting Hamas the way you say you are. You're actually just killing civilians.
Yeah, I mean, old Mao Zedong, just a low intensity conflict about hearts and minds. American troops were briefed all the time in Afghanistan. If you go into a village and you kill, 5 innocent civilians, you've probably now created 50 new insurgents from the neighborhood who are going to react to what you've done. And that's sort of what's happening to Israel. Their genocide is not just empowering the people of Hamas and Gaza, but it's alienating the world. It's having the opposite effect.
Yeah, and I want to just say one more point before we move on. The one government that fits this description that's not in the region is China, and I think you could say Russia as well. But China has had same party, same system for 70 plus years. And one of the things that it has done, which I think Iran and other, or Syria, I believe, genuinely want to do this, couldn't. Iran definitely wants to do this. It is build an economy that can improve the conditions of people. Because when you do that, well, then these things that are happening around you, like U.S. sanctions and war threats and attempts to get you to provoke you into a war, a la Ukraine, those things don't have the same kind of impact like they did with Syria, which, Israel from what is it? Ever since it occupied the Golan Heights, maybe before that, has wanted to take over Syria, and the U.S. has wanted to overthrow Syria's government from even before 2011. And so all of those pressures, I think, there was in this period when Syria was under this just absolute distress. I think a lot of people actually overlooked the fact that Syria was under so much pressure and assault, especially since October 7th, 2023, when this, Hamas and the resistance took the gamble on essentially provoking Israel into a genocide in order to destroy Israel's ongoing, colonial project, it seems to me that a lot of people did ignore what was happening to Syria, because we were all just like, Syria is good. They at least defeated the dirty war, but there was obviously things still going on that just left it vulnerable when the moment came.
You know, one of the interesting things about Syria is, and again, as a possible indicator of the fragility of the government of Bashar al-Assad, is during all this time, even before October 7th, Israel was bombing Syria, you know, if not on a daily basis, at least several times a week, and bombing downtown Damascus, bombing the Damascus airport, bombing, you know, major cities. And Syria would defend itself, but not with tremendous capability. There was two things that came out. One, the Russians never really fully jumped in and sided with Syria and said, Israel, you can't attack anymore. We're not going to allow you to attack. Russia pushed back sometimes diplomatically, but by and large, Russia said, Syria, you're on your own. And Syria couldn't do anything. Syria didn't stop the attack. Syria didn't, you know, what does a nation do normally when they're bombed like that? When you humiliate them, bomb their capital, bomb, you know, the airport and all that, you retaliate, you strike back. Syria never once lifted a finger against Israel for any of these attacks. And you have to ask yourself, why? Why wasn't Syria willing to push back against these flagrant, you know, war crimes being committed against them? And I think the answer is that people were just tired of the fight, tired of defending this regime, that they just quit. It's just an interesting, because there's more that Syria could have done, but they didn't. You know, it might have invited an escalation of the conflict, but since when does a nation, after being bombed indiscriminately the way Syria was bombed by both by Israel and the United States, just take it? A sovereign state with a powerful military, just take it and don't respond. I think that was another indication that Syria was just rotting from inside, that the military, you know, either wasn't able to defend or just had given up, and it just determined that Syria wasn't worth defending anymore.
Yeah. Well, before we move on to the next topic, Scott, I wanted to give you a chance to talk about an event you have. You have many events you have coming up, a book tour. For some reason, it's not letting me open your link, but to pull it up, there's a little bit of a conspiracy here. Bear with me, everyone. Interesting. So I'm trying to pull up your website, and it's almost as if we have SBU folks working their way on the inside here. How about this, Scott? Talk about this event while I get this up.
Sure.
Sorry.
Yeah. Basically, Clarity Press published a book last year in the early fall called "Covering Ukraine." There it is, and it's a collaboration between myself and Anya Kay, who's I think increasingly well-known podcaster who does a show called Through the Eyes of Anya Kay. And early on in the Ukraine conflict, she began to ask for interviews, and over the course of 2 years, we did a large number of interviews. And